What is the worst reason that someone filed for divorce? I met Diane back in the late 90s. We were both young, ambitious, and in love with the idea of being in love. She was the kind of woman who lit up a room just by walking into it. Smart, successful, beautiful. Everything I could have ever wanted. We got married a couple of years after we met, and for a while, it was everything I imagined marriage should be. We built a life together, bought a house, and settled into a routine that, at the time, felt like happiness. But routines have a way of slowly strangling you if you're not careful. What starts as comfort turns into complacency, and before you know it, you're just going through the motions, waiting for anything, to shake things up. For Diane, that shake-up came in the form of her success. She was already doing well when we got married, but over the years, she became even more accomplished. Her career took off, and she found a hobby that not only brought her joy, but also made her a small fortune on the side. She was making more money than we had ever dreamed of, and I couldn't have been prouder. But with success came a change, and she started spending more time away from home, traveling for work, attending conferences, and networking with people I could barely keep up. I tried to be supportive, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was leaving me behind. And maybe I was right, because as her life became more glamorous, mine became, well, the opposite. You see, while Diane was out there conquering the world, I was stuck in a rut. My job wasn't exactly fulfilling, and over time, I started to let myself go. A few extra pounds here, a few more there, until one day I woke up and realized I was over 400 pounds. I didn't recognize the man in the mirror anymore, and I knew Diane didn't either. That's when the drinking started. Just a little at first, to take the edge off after a long day. But soon, a couple of beers turned into a couple of bottles, and before I knew it, I was drinking myself into a stupor every night. Diane tried to talk to me about it at first. She was gentle, concerned. But I wasn't in the mood to listen. I was too busy drowning in self-pity and denial. I don't know when exactly it happened, but at some point Diane stopped trying. She stopped looking at me with concern and started looking at me with something else. Something colder. Resentment, maybe? Disgust? It didn't matter. The love was gone, replaced by something toxic that neither of us knew how to deal with. My health went downhill fast. The weight kept piling on and my drinking spiraled out of control. I was hospitalized 3 times in as many years for heart problems. By the time I had my third triple bypass, the doctors warned me that if I didn't change my lifestyle, I wouldn't live to see another year. But by then, I was too far gone. I didn't care anymore. I was angry at the world, angry at Diane for her success, angry at myself for failing, and I just wanted to drink away the pain. Diane was still there. Physically, but she might as well have been a ghost. We stopped talking about anything that mattered, and when we did speak, it usually ended in a fight. I accused her of cheating more times than I can count. It didn't matter that I had no proof, that deep down I knew she wasn't that kind of person. I was hurting, and I wanted her to hurt too. And hurt her, I did. But I also hurt myself. The more I pushed her away, the more I hated myself for doing it, and the more I drank to numb that hatred. It was a vicious cycle, and I didn't know how to break free. It was around this time that Diane started to change too. She began losing weight. Not that she needed to, but it was like she was shedding the old her along with the pounds. She became more confident, more self-assured, and more distant. I could see the admiration in other people's eyes when they looked at her, and I hated, but more than that, I hated myself for driving her to this point. We were living in the same house, but we might as well have been living in different worlds. And the worst part was, I knew it was my fault. I knew I was killing our marriage, but I was too stubborn, too proud to admit it. Then came At first, it was just a way to keep the party going a little longer, to feel alive when I was dead inside. But it didn't take long for it to become another crutch, another way to avoid facing the reality of my situation. Diane found out, of course. She wasn't stupid, but by then she had given up trying to save me. I think she'd already decided to save herself. Looking back, I can't say I blame her. I had become someone unrecognizable, a shell of the man she married. And the sad thing is, I think I knew, even then, that I was losing, but instead of fighting for us, I just kept sinking deeper into my own self-destruction. It all came to a head one night when she finally confronted me. I was drunk, high, and in no mood for a lecture. But this time, it wasn't a lecture. This time, it was an ultimatum. I can't do this anymore, she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and sadness. I can't watch you kill yourself like this. I can't be with someone who doesn't care if they live or die. I need you to choose, John, me or this mess you've become. I should have chosen her. I wanted to, but the truth was, I didn't know how to be the man she needed, and I had lost myself so completely that I didn't even know where to start looking for the pieces. So I did what I always did. I lashed out. I said things I didn't mean, things I knew would hurt her, because hurting her was easier than admitting that I was already broken beyond repair. I'll tell you what, I slurred, barely able to stand. Why don't you just go find one of those rich assholes you hang out with? I'm sure they'd be more than happy to take my place. She looked at me, and for a moment, I thought she was going to slap, but she didn't. Instead, she just stared at me, her eyes filled with a sadness I had never seen before. I'm done, John, she said quietly. I'm done trying to save you when you don't want to be saved. And with that, she turned and walked away. I watched her go, too numb to stop her, too lost to care. And that was the last time I saw the woman I once loved. Life has a funny way of continuing, even when you feel like it should stop. After Diane walked out that night, I half expected her to file for divorce immediately. But days turned into weeks, and I didn't hear a word from her. The silence was almost worse than the shouting matches we used to have. At least when we were fighting, I knew she still cared on some level. This silence? It felt like she'd already erased me from her life. Then one day I got a call from her. She was calm, almost businesslike, as if she had flipped a switch and turned off whatever emotions she still had left for me. John, she said, we need to talk. I didn't say much. I was too hungover and too weary to care. She told me she was filing for divorce. It was no surprise, really. But what did surprise me was how she talked about it, as if she were discussing the weather or a meeting she had to attend. There was no anger, no sadness, just cold, hard facts. She explained that she had already hired a lawyer and that they would be sending over the paperwork soon. She assured me that she wasn't looking to take everything. She just wanted a clean break, something that would allow her to move on with her life without dragging things out. But then she mentioned the life insurance. I've been thinking, she said. Given your health, it would make sense for me to stay on as the beneficiary of your life insurance policy. At first, I didn't understand what she was getting at. Why would she care about that? We were about to get divorced, for God's sake. But then it hit. She wasn't just trying to tie up loose ends. She was planning for the future, a future where I wouldn't be around. You're kidding, right? I asked, half laughing, half disbelieving. You want me to keep you as the beneficiary? After all this? John, I'm not asking for much, she replied, her voice steady and calm. But I think it's only fair, considering everything I've put up with over the years. Fair. That word echoed in my mind. What was fair about any of this? But I knew better than to argue. I wasn't in any position to fight her, and part of me knew that she was right. I had been a burden on her for so long that maybe this was the least I could do. But agreeing to that would be admitting that I was done, that there was no coming back from the mess I had made of my life, and I wasn't ready to admit that, not yet anyway. I don't think so, I said finally, my voice firmer than I expected. If we're getting divorced, then that's it. You're not going to be part of my life anymore. You want a clean break? Then fine. But you're not getting a dime from me. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost picture her, sitting in her office, tapping her perfectly manicured nails on the desk as she processed what I had just said. Are you sure about that? She asked, her tone icy. Because this doesn't have to get ugly, but if you push me, it will. I'm sure, I replied, though inside I was anything but. You want out? Then you're out, but you're not taking my money with— Fine, she said curtly, if that's how you want it. And just like that, she hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time after that, wondering if I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. But what did it matter? My life was already a series of mistakes, one after the other, leading me down a path I didn't know how to get off of. The divorce proceedings began shortly after that. I received the paperwork, skimmed through it, and was about to sign when something stopped me. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something about the whole thing felt off. Maybe it was the fact that Diane seemed so detached, so willing to walk away without a fight. Or maybe it was the knowledge that signing those papers would be the final nail in the coffin of whatever was left of our marriage. But then something happened that I didn't expect. Diane called again, and this time She was different. There was a sense of urgency in her voice that hadn't been there before. "John, I need you to stop the divorce," she said, almost pleading. "What? Why?" I asked, more confused than ever. "I thought you wanted this." "I did," she admitted. "But things have changed. Look, I talked to my lawyer and, well, the life insurance thing is a deal breaker for me. If you won't keep me as the beneficiary, then there's no point in going through with this." "Wait, so you're saying you want to stay married?" I asked, incredulous. "Just for the money?" "John, it's not just about the money," she said, though I could hear the lie in her voice. "It's about making sure I'm taken care of, given everything I've sacrificed for you." Sacrificed. There was that word again, cutting through me like a knife. She wasn't wrong. She had sacrificed so much for me over the years. Her happiness, her peace of mind, her love. But what was left now? A hollow marriage built on resentment and regret? "So what? You're just going to wait around until I die?" I asked, bitterness seeping into my words. "John, please," she said softly. "I'm not asking for much. Just consider it. You know you're not in good health, and if something happens..." "If something happens," I interrupted, "then you'll get what you've always wanted, won't you?" She didn't respond right away, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about love, or even about moving on. It was about securing her future, even if that meant staying tied to a man she no longer cared for, waiting for the inevitable. For a moment, I considered saying yes. What did it matter anyway? My life was already in shambles, and I didn't have much time left. But then I thought about the principle of it all, about what it meant to give in, to let her win this final battle. "I'm sorry, Diane," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper, "but I can't do it." There was a long pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was cold, devoid of the warmth it once held. "Then I guess we're done here," she said flatly. "Goodbye, John." And with that, she was gone, this time for good. But that wasn't the end of the story. Not by a long shot. Because as it turned out, Diane wasn't willing to let things go so easily. A few days after that conversation, I received an email from her lawyer. It was brief, but the message was clear. Diane was withdrawing the divorce. At first, I couldn't believe it. After everything we'd been through, she was actually going to stay married to me? But as I read the email again, the reality of the situation sank in. Diane wasn't staying because she wanted to make things work. She was staying because she knew I didn't have long to live, and she wanted to make sure she got what was coming to her. I was furious. But more than that, I was hurt. Hurt that the woman I had once loved, the woman who had once loved me, could be so cold, so calculating. And as the days turned into weeks, I realized that I had two choices. I could continue down the path of self-destruction, or I could fight back in whatever way I could. I chose to fight. The world has a way of showing you the worst in people when you least expect it. Just when I thought Diane's decision to stay married was the lowest point, I learned that there's always further to fall. Weeks turned into months, and my health continued to decline. Diane and I lived like strangers, sharing a house, but little else. I was trying to keep myself together, but it felt like everything was conspiring to push me over the edge. My life had become a cruel joke, and I was the punchline. Then one day, while I was at home, barely able to move from the couch, I got a call from an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. He was a lawyer, and though we hadn't kept in touch, he'd heard through the grapevine about my situation. He had seen cases like mine before and wanted to offer some advice. "John, you need to protect yourself," he said, his voice grave. "Diane's staying married to you for a reason, and it's not because she loves you. If you die before the divorce is finalized, she gets everything. But if you divorce her before then, you can protect what little you have left." I knew he was right, but the idea of going through another round of legal battles made me sick to my stomach. I was already so worn down, and the thought of fighting Diane in court seemed like more than I could handle. But I didn't have a choice. If I didn't act, she would get everything, and I couldn't let that happen. So I contacted my own lawyer and started the process of filing for divorce again. This time, I was the one pushing for it, and I was determined to get it done before it was too late. But just as I was gearing up for the fight, Diane threw a curveball I never saw coming. One morning, out of the blue, I received another letter from Diane's lawyer. It was a request to delay the divorce proceedings indefinitely. The reason? Diane was claiming she needed more time to prepare, citing various personal and financial issues that she conveniently hadn't mentioned before. At first, I couldn't believe it. Delay the divorce? Why would she want to do that? But then, The reality hit me like a ton of bricks. She wasn't just staying married to me for the life insurance. She was stalling. Diane knew my health was deteriorating rapidly, and she was banking on the fact that I might not make it through the legal process. If I died while we were still married, she'd get everything without having to lift a finger. It was a dirty, underhanded move that made a twisted kind of sense. And the worst part was, I didn't know if I had the strength to fight it. My body was failing me. My mind was clouded with fear and anger, and the thought of dragging this out for who knew how long was almost too much to bear. But I had to try. So I instructed my lawyer to fight the delay, to push for the divorce to go through as quickly as possible. We filed motions. We made arguments. We did everything we could to keep things moving forward. But every time we took a step forward, Diane's lawyer found a way to push us 2 steps back. It was like running in quicksand, and I was slowly sinking. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. It was a few weeks into the legal battle when I got another call from my lawyer. This time, the news was even more devastating. Diane had filed a motion to strip me of my parental rights. She was claiming that I was unfit to be a father due to my health and my past behavior, and she wanted full custody of our son. I was stunned. How could she do this? I knew our marriage was over, but I never thought she would try to take our son away from me. He was the one good thing I had left, the one thing that kept me going, even on my darkest days. And now, she was trying to take that away too. My lawyer explained that Diane was using every tactic in the book to paint me as a danger to our son. She was bringing up my drinking, my use, my health issues, everything she could to make it seem like I was a threat. And the worst part was, I knew she had a case. I wasn't the man I used to be, and I hadn't been a good father for a long time, but I loved my son more than anything, and the thought of losing him was more than I could bear. As we prepared to fight this new battle, I couldn't help but think about how far we had fallen. This woman, who I had once loved with all my heart, was now my enemy. We were locked in a war where there were no winners, only casualties. And the biggest casualty of all was our son. The court hearings were brutal. Diane's lawyer tore me apart, bringing up every mistake I had ever made, every moment of weakness, every failure. They made me out to be a monster, and I didn't have the strength to fight back. I tried to explain that I was getting help, that I was trying to turn things around, but it was clear that the damage had already been done. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, Diane took the stand. She played the part of the concerned mother perfectly, talking about how much she loved our son, how she was only trying to protect him. She even managed to squeeze out a few tears for good measure. It was an Oscar-worthy performance, and the judge ate it up. When it was all over, the judge ruled in her favor. She got full custody, and I was granted limited visitation rights, supervised, of course. It was a crushing blow, one that left me reeling. I had lost everything: my marriage, my health, my son, and all because I had let myself fall so far. But as I sat there, staring at the paperwork that finalized the court's decision, something inside me snapped. I realized that I couldn't go on like this. I couldn't keep letting Diane win, keep letting her take everything from me. I had to do something, anything, to turn my life around. So I made a decision. I was going to get better, no matter what it took. I was going to fight for my health, for my son, for whatever scraps of dignity I had left. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew I might not succeed. But I had to try, because if I didn't, I knew that Diane would win. I couldn't let that happen.